Good morning, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
My name is Sarah Kelly Palmer.
And I'm Kayla David.
Welcome to those of you who are joining us again, as we are here every other week, and welcome to those who are with us for the first time. Kayla and I work at Family Service of Rhode Island, and we are part of what's called the Healing Department. And we love to come together here on Facebook as part of our Be Well RI information series, where we come together to talk about lots of different topics, many of them related to the COVID-19 pandemic and how we are coping together. Family Service of Rhode Island is a nonprofit social service agency, and we serve the entire state of Rhode Island. And we've been around for a really long time, and we offer a variety of different services, including telehealth counseling.
And as Sarah said, we come together today and every other Wednesday to discuss supporting wellness during COVID-19. So we ask that you please take a moment to share this with your friends or to start a watch party and help us reach as many people we can with this important information. Now more than ever, it is so important for us to be able to reach out if we're struggling or to reach out to loved ones and provide them help, connect them with assistance if they're struggling. COVID-19 and all of the stressors that are coming with it have brought on such a great deal of stress for all of us in our communities. And that's impacting not only our physical health, but our well-being and our mental health.
So, I'm very interested in our topic this morning, Kayla, because as you know, it's something I'm grappling with as a
Yes.
parent. So, today we're talking about conquering the return to school. So, families across Rhode Island, across the United States, are really debating and grappling with the difficult decision around returning to school this fall. And parents have to decide between two not maybe ideal options, right? So, either going back to school in person, some of that is 5 days a week, some of that's kind of hybrid model, or either keeping your children home for distance learning, or perhaps you don't have a choice because your school district is saying we are only doing distance learning. And of course, all of this is in the context of trying to protect children's physical health. And much of it, is within this context of it might be impacting their academic and their social development. And what we talk a lot about is kind of their overall psychological well-being. So it's really a tough thing that I think parents and kids are facing right now this fall.
Yeah. I mean, Sarah, I think that you're so right. There's two not so great options. I mean, there's going back to school in person, which we know schools are taking all sorts of precautions, but we
Mhm.
can never eliminate the risk entirely. And so then many families are saying, if I'm lucky enough, I'm going to keep my kids home. But that also has a cost to our academic development, our social development of our kids. So no matter what, this
Mhm.
year, school is going to look different if you opted in, if to in person or hybrid, if you opted into a distance learning model, it doesn't matter. School is going to look different. And while the current restrictions on students learning won't last forever, and we can
Mhm.
keep telling ourselves, right,
Right.
that's a huge part of it, it's not going to last forever. The consequences of the pandemic on students' academic progress, on families' emotional well
Right.
being, their economic well being, our children's academic well being, those are likely to persist into the future. So we want to recognize that returning back to school, whatever that might look like in your community, includes a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. And we're hearing a lot of that from parents and kids, not kind of really knowing what's going to happen next and being very anxious about the return to school. Although there are no easy answers for returning to school this fall, we can begin to kind of implement things that might help to mitigate the stress, that
Mhm.
might help to mitigate those that impact long term. So today, Sarah and I will be talking about tips both for students returning to school in person and for those who have opted into a full virtual learning, and then recognizing that many families are going to likely do a mix of both.
It's funny, Kayla, because a friend posted a meme on Facebook yesterday that said something like, it's like one of those cartoons, and it says, parenting is easy. It's like riding a bike, except the bike is on fire and you're on fire and everything's on fire. And I have to say, I related to it a lot because that it kind of feels like that being a parent right now, that there's no good choice, and especially for parents that don't have a choice, right? So one thing I want to preface our conversation by saying to all those parents out there, it's really important that we support each other. For those of you who are friends with parents who aren't a parent, but who have family members, there's so much judgment out there. I just want to say, no matter what your decision is, or your friend's decisions, or your family's decision, support them, because parents need that now more than ever. So, today we really want to frame our discussion about returning back to school in kind of three topics, right? So first, we know that the more we can better understand, the more we know, and the more information we have, we can have better understanding of stressful situations, right? So that's for us as adults, the same goes for kids, right? So in preparing your kids to go back to school, because it's going to look really different if they're returning in person, it's really helpful to review with them what's going to look different, and how they kind of fit into that. So things like, it's helpful to review why we wear our masks, how we wear our masks, right? We wear our masks to keep not only ourselves safe, but to keep other people safe. Um, why it's important to wash our hands, right? Teaching and reviewing. We've all gone through this with our kids, no matter how old they are, how to do that properly, right? And why it's important, and why, especially for younger kids, why desks are going to be spaced out in the classroom, and why you're not going to be able to go to the cafeteria, right? Or interact or play as you would last year for school, right? So the more information that you can give to your kids, the better. Um, So, and I think it's hard we may know what that is going to look like, but unless we talk to our kids about that, they might not have a picture of that, right? So things like changing classes in hallways, that's not necessarily going to happen, right? Kids are going to be, most of the time, if they're returning in person, remaining in pods or teams where they're steady in their classrooms, right? There's no going to lunch, that lunch is going to come to them. Um, and that not only will they be wearing masks or face shields, but all their teachers and the staff in the school are also going to be wearing masks. So for young kids, all of this information, especially if they've been to school before, can be confusing or scary. Um, so the more you can prepare kids in a calm, informative way, the better that they'll be able to manage school and that information when they are faced with it, and that can really help to kind of reduce their stress as they navigate this kind of new normal that we're facing this fall.
Yeah, and I think another tip, Sarah, is making these things a habit, and
Yeah,
knowing that our kids are learning from us,
yeah.
even the things that we don't necessarily want them to learn from us, they're learning from us. They're always watching. So I think that idea of making a habit of things now. So we all, adults included, I don't think any of us knew how to wash our hands correctly prior to COVID-19. One of the things is doing those, as you're saying, as a reminder, and in taking these opportunities now, if you haven't been doing it, to really be reinforcing that, so that it is much so that our children are much more successful at it when they're back to school. So
Mhm.
when we come in as a family, we're all washing our hands together, we're all singing the song, we're all doing the 20 seconds. Same thing for wearing masks. Masks are uncomfortable. And so they're uncomfortable for kids, they're uncomfortable for adults, but we want to make a habit out of that. The more that we make a habit out of it, the more natural it is that our kids put them on in the morning, get on the bus or go to school and are wearing them the whole time. And we as adults, make a habit of that, right? So,
Mhm.
if it has been that maybe you haven't had to wear a mask because you are maybe you're still kind of social distancing in your house, or you have you're out in the parts of Rhode Island that have more land than we have here in Providence. Maybe we're practicing that again. We're beginning to implement it, so that we are modeling that as parents. So we're wearing them, and then we're having our kids begin that habit of wearing them. Especially for younger kids, their thought process is rather black or white. So
Mhm.
it's going to be much more confusing if they go into school if that hasn't been something that's been habitual in their household. So again, the more that we can talk about it, and then the more that we can begin implementing these things, just like we would normally for the school year in about mid-August, begin implementing our sleep schedules, right? I remember as a kid, always mid-August was when my mom started to tell us that we went back to our sleep schedule. We started waking up at the time that we were supposed to for school.
Yep.
We started going to bed at the time that we were supposed to for school. That was in order to create a habit, so our bodies were prepared for that first day. We have to do that also with some of these new habits in order to make it so that it is easier for our kids to navigate those first few weeks of school.
It's so important, and I've got to get on that because it's almost time. Um, the other quick thing I wanted to say, Kayla, that I meant to mention before when we were talking about kind of preparing your kids for school is this also the idea, so you're preparing them for what's gonna be different, but also reminding them about the positive things of school, right? So balancing that conversation between preparation, this is what's gonna look different, and reminding them, like, you're gonna get to see your friends, right? You in school, or you really like social studies or history. So reminding them that while it's different and not the same, that there are positive aspects to it. And I think that can really also help balance that anxiety and that information. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to throw that out
that
there.
thing of like some things will be different, but some things will remain the same. It's going to be the same building in most cases for most kids. We're going to have maybe our same teacher as last year, or they're going to be in the hallways when we are walking into school, or they're going to welcome us when we are outside on our first day. I think that's so important,
Yeah.
Sarah, to really balance that. You're so right.
And that ties into this idea, which is kind of a repeated theme that we talk about all the time, is to make time to talk as a family about school, right? So talk to your kids about how it's going at school, about how they're feeling about the changes. What are they thinking, right? Really creating that space each day, whether it's at the dinner table or, right when they come home from school, to have those conversations. We as parents might not be able to have control over kind of the policies and protocols that the school is doing. But what we can do is listen to our kids and support our kids, and having that open dialogue and giving them a place to share their feelings will help reduce their overall stress day to day. And you know I have to remind myself of this all the time as a parent, is that when my son comes to me, he's 11, he might come to me with a problem, and immediately, of course, I want to fix that problem for him, right? Or a concern. And I have to remember that really most of the time what he needs from me is for me to listen to him. And I think going into this school year with all of the changes, kids are really going to need us as parents to listen. And that goes for if your kids are at home as well, right? So even doing distance learning is stressful, it's different, it's isolating, right? So kids really need to be able to share with you as parents about how they're feeling about school. And while we might want to fix it, we really, really just need to be there to listen and support, and create that space. Um, and that's really gonna kinda help with the stress level. And the other thing that we always talk about is how we as parents or caregivers or adults in children's lives, right? While kids might be anxious and having a lot of emotions and feelings about school, we also are having a lot of the same emotions and anxiety, and kids really look to us to see how we're responding. So if I approach my son after his first day of school and say, were kids wearing masks? Were you staying away from them? I want to know about the protocols. That's going to really contribute to his own anxiety instead of me approaching it in a calm, supportive way. We really need to model for our kids um, because they're looking to us.
Yeah, and I think it is. I mean, Sarah, the stress is not just on the kids. We're all under an immense amount of stress. And
Yes.
when we are under stress, one of the things that can happen is sometimes we don't want to hear about other people's emotions,
No.
even if it's our kids. We might be a little bit more reactive. It's just part of that, the symptomology that's coming in terms of mental health in the COVID-19 crisis. We are seeing that people are a little bit more emotionally reactive because we are so anxious about what's going on and things feel so much out of our control. So being kind of mindful of that as a caregiver is so important and valuable. It's
Yeah.
okay for us to be anxious, and it's also okay for parents to talk to their kids about that they're concerned or
Mhm.
they're worried. But how we do that is really important. And sometimes when we don't have the language, it can come it can come out in a way
Oh,
like you
yeah.
were talking about of, were people doing this, did you do this, you didn't do
Mhm.
this, I'm mad at you, right? Instead of that kind of slowing it down and being able to kind of reinforce the positive. And I think, I talk to parents all the time, and especially now during COVID-19, 3 positives to 1 negative is
Yep.
like such a rule of thumb that's so important right now. And we might not be perfect at it. But that idea of making kind of a conscious effort to see, what am I saying that's positive versus what am I saying that's maybe a negative, can be really, really helpful. And just reinforcing what you said, Sarah, we don't have to solve the problem. We
Right.
just have to listen.
And I think for parents and caregivers, remembering, so you're creating that space to listen to your kids. You lean on your friends and your family as the adult or caregiver, right? So if you are having a lot of anxiety or worries, talk to another adult about that, right? So you can also have your place to express your fears and what you're worried about. Just as we do for our kids, it's important to remember that for ourselves.
Yeah, that's so important, Sarah. That safe kind of space, right? And it doesn't have to be a physical space, but those
So,
natural supports or those people. I mean, it's that idea of it takes a village, right? And it doesn't just take a village to support a child. It takes a village to support the everyone in the family. We
mhm.
all need those connections or those spaces where we can be really honest about how we're feeling, because this is a really difficult time right now. For those families that have opted into full or partial distance learning, and I know that some of our families already have in Rhode Island, others are now just getting the information about what their options are. It's going to be so important to set our kids up for success. And as you know, if we're thinking that maybe I think some schools have even been talking about hybrid models. So we're going to have kids in school some days, out of school some days. So the idea of setting up their physical space is going to be really important. And one way to do this is to mimic the natural structure of the school day. So, we talked about this in Conquering Our Workplace last week.
That's
Like, some
right.
of this is so familiar, is that the school day does have natural movement and socialization breaks through the day. So we have a natural entrance into our school day. It doesn't start until we enter school and the bell rings, and it ends at a certain time each day. And then we're able to have a natural break in terms of movement and transition out of that space. So when we're thinking about that natural structure of the school day, we can really think about how we best mimic that in the home
Mhm.
environment. So no matter the age of the child, a child, even in high school or college, is never doing 6 hours straight of school without a movement break, without some sort of socialization break or lunch. It always has a start time and an end time, even if they haven't completed their work. And that was something we kind of talked about on Conquering Workplace last 2 weeks ago. Was we you know we could us as adults and kids can get into these patterns where we feel we put more expectation on than would have been there before in the midst of COVID-19 in our virtual workplaces and our virtual schooling. It's going to be important to have an end to the day, and that it's okay to have work that you're completing tomorrow, just like you would have had at school. Um, and then having those breaks for lunch, that's so important. And, I know for me, when I've been working from home, I've been meal prepping. Like I still do my Sunday meal prep. So I have food that's easily available. So it doesn't take a long period of time, but I am inclined to take the lunch break, because if it feels overwhelming to now make a whole lunch, we're likely going to ignore that body sensation and just kind of continue on with our work. And then ultimately, it's that checking in or helping our kids to really set up a routine to check in with their own bodies. So, movement breaks are helpful because we can feel where the tension sits in our body, or we can that reminder of, oh, okay, this is the time that I go to the bathroom. One of the things that can happen is we can almost numb out to our physical sensation. We cannot check in with our body, and we can go straight through. And that it's going to be really important in terms of teaching our kids self-care, that self-care is about checking in with our bodies. Have we eaten enough 3 healthy meals today? Have we drank enough water? Have we gone to the bathroom when we need to go to the bathroom? All of those things. Have we moved today? Have we had any physical movement? Have we had any socialization? Those core pieces of self-care were naturally part of that school structure. And so if we have kids that are staying home for virtual learning, that's going to be an important thing to structure in from the very beginning and make a habit of it.
It's also important, Kayla, and I know I've been thinking a lot about this, is to figure out how we can find ways for kids to increase their overall socialization and reduce isolation, right? So that's really important for parents whose kids are going to be doing full distance learning, but it's also important for parents whose kids are also going back to school, because school's not going to look the same as far as after school activities and sports and things. So some parents have started to think about how they can be creative about that, right? And creating their own kind of socialization opportunities for their kids within their friends and family kind of close circles. One parent that I've spoken to talked about their child being part of a pod that they created themselves, right? So their child and 3 other children, all the parents are kind of coming together, and the kids are going to do virtual learning together, and the parents are all going to take turns kind of overseeing, right, the virtual learning for that day. Which I thought was a really creative way to do that, right? In their houses or in their backyards. Not all parents have that choice, but I think a lot of parents are stretching and figuring out creative ways to make this work, right? Because while some parents are opting for distance learning, some parents now don't have a choice, right? In a lot of communities in Rhode Island, which I think was surprising for some. For parents whose kids are going back and who are used to kind of doing clubs after school and all of those things, those social activities that school has, dances and chorus and band, many of those things aren't going to be happening for kids. So getting creative about getting kids in their pod together after school, or maybe you're hosting a soccer game in your backyard. It's really important to think about that and reach out to other parents and other close family members to kind of create those opportunities for socialization. Because I know for my son, we've kept our circle really tight. And I think this is going to be a shock to his system, right? And he's an extrovert. He loves socialization, but we've been so hunkered down for so long that I think it's really going to be a shift for not only kids, but us as parents. So not forgetting about that socialization piece is really, really important.
Yeah. And then I think one of the other big things around, structure is our environment. And our
Mhm.
environment can really contribute to managing stress, to increasing our attention and our ability to focus and ultimately being successful if we set up our environments the right way. Everyone's situation is different, and many people have very limited space to be able to set up these spaces if their child's doing virtual learning or that hybrid model that many of our schools are choosing to begin with. And I kept thinking when we were thinking about today was our guest last 2 weeks ago, Leslie Wico, who just floored us. I mean, I still think about some of the things she said. I've reset up my desk. The things that she was talking about for conquering the workplace are so similar that our kids can enact for, and our parents can help our children with when we're thinking about how we set up for school. So, when we think about one of the hardest things that I think happens when we are having everything in one place is that school spills in to the house, right? That's those stressors of school. When we walk out the school doors, there is something that our brain does when we walk out a door, when we have a transition. We tend to leave a lot of the stressors from that space in that space. Not even consciously, subconsciously, we're really leaving those there. We might not have that luxury, and our kids might not have that luxury this year. So the way we set up our spaces are going to be really important. So we want to designate a space, right? And that can be anywhere in the house. If you have a quieter space, that might be a nice thing to do. I know last year I talked to a teacher that was doing virtual learning, and her son was also doing virtual learning, and they didn't want their work to be in the same place as their bedrooms, but they didn't have other space in the house. So they ended up switching rooms. So during the day, her son would go into her bedroom, use his desk there and do his work at that desk, and she would work in his room. And so then the stress of the day is not living in the same place you sleep. So I think parents are getting so creative with the way that they do things. And that's one of those examples of sometimes it can, when we use our bedrooms for sleep, or, one of the things is kids love to like lay in their bed to do this. I would really encourage that we get out of the bed because one of the things is our brain connects our bed with what we do in it. So if we only sleep in our bed, or we kind of, for the most part, sleep in our bed, then kids will get tired really quickly when they enter bed because their brain has connected the bed with sleep. But if we're now doing schoolwork or we're doing other things, watching TV, all of these other things in the bed, we can then see issues with sleep functioning, which is then not going to allow our kids to be totally successful. So finding space. And I think for families that do have the funds, that had set up funds for going back to school, we might reallocate some of those funds in a different way. So we might not need all of the back to school clothes, but we might need noise canceling headphones because we have a very small house and lots of kids doing distant learning in it. So thinking about if you do have those, how you can reallocate those funds to get your kids the things they need. And then, having that designated space. And Leslie had talked about 2 weeks ago, being able to put that stuff away. So maybe we still get a backpack.
Yep.
Or I have a family that's making making lockers in their house, which is really cute. So they can put everything away. So if it's at the beginning of the day, we take everything out of our backpack or our locker that's in our designated school space. And then at the end of the day, we're putting that back away as a signal that this is the end of the school day. And we can even use, the timers or other things that allow us to have a little bell that tells us when the school day is over, so that we are ritualizing that piece of beginning and end. And we're setting up those spaces in terms of what we need, where those things are, so they're easily accessible. And then having space to roam in, right? Of whether it's that they can go outside for a walk or walk with the dog. Maybe they are just doing jumping jacks in the living room, some kind of having a space that we go in for a break that allows us to get a snack, but also allows us to get some movement or activity in.
That's so important. And those are such good ideas, Kayla. I think the last kind of point about conquering back to school, I still can't believe it's September, is that I think we have to prepare ourselves and also prepare our kids that things might change also, right? Which it's so 2020, right? So, if kids are going back to school full time, if they're doing full time distance learning, those things might all change, right? And that can be hard to predict. So I think it helps to set kids' expectations, but also, again, I keep going back to us parents setting our own expectations as well, and knowing that that we can conquer it, right? No matter what comes at us and what changes happen. Um, we'll be able to conquer it. So, if your kid's going back full time, that's great, and we hope that that can continue, but preparing them that, the adults are working to keep them safe. We're really taking this week by week or month by month, and when there is a change, that might not seem so shocking to them, right? And it might not be so anxiety provoking. So preparing yourselves and others that things might change. And I do think, again, having those positive messages are really important, and letting kids of all ages know there's a lot of adults working really, really hard. Teachers, faculty, principals, parents, social workers, everybody, school nurses working really, really hard to do their best to keep everybody safe. So, um, we can't stress that enough, balancing that with all of the changes that there are people out there working hard to keep them safe, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and we'll share, I'm thinking back to our very first Be Well
Oh,
Live where we
yes.
talked about how to talk to kids about COVID-19. We'll share that again because I think we need to have a little booster. And I know
Yes.
for many kids, they're really scared. They're scared of what will happen if they get the virus or someone they love gets the virus. Maybe they don't have a total understanding of it, or we need a
Mhm.
booster. We need
Yep.
to start talking again about COVID-19. And so we'll share that again. We'll also share some of the resources that we sent out, like some books that have been really helpful for parents to talk about
Mhm.
COVID-19 with their kids. Um, and please know if there's things that are going on, please don't hesitate to reach out. This is a really, really stressful time. As Sarah had said at the beginning, we have therapists here that are specialized in working with adults and children impacted by stress,
Mhm.
life stress, or mental health. And especially with going back to school, we can see a lot of mental health issues or anxiety for our kids, and we might need a little bit more support. And so we want to encourage you, if that's the case, to reach out.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today to talk about conquering back to school. It is here, it's happening. Um, we're here to help and support you, like Kayla said. So please join us again in another 2 weeks
Yes,
where,
and
yeah, we conquer another topic. Go
yeah,
for it,
and
Kayla.
be well and be safe.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.